The Nazi regime today is known for committing terrible crimes against humanity, and Hitler is despised, hated, and detested. However, during the years of the totalitarian state in Germany between 1933 to 1945, there was little active and passive resistance against the Nazi regime. Despite the cruel actions against the Jews, the oppressive nature of the one-party system, and the limited freedom, there are only a few cases of attempting to overthrow Hitler. The question is what forms of resistance the Nazi regime existed during the height of its power, and how was Hitler able to keep resistance levels so low? Generally, resistance was in the minority. Ordinary Germans did not act out against the Nazi regime, and no large-scale organisations to overthrow Hitler were formed. Typically, men and women formed isolated deeds, such as harbouring Jews or dispersing leaflets. Gestapo records reveal around 800,000 Germans, in a population of more than 66 million, were jailed for active resistance, leaving the rest of the nation to either silently tolerate the atrocities of the Nazis, or worse, participate. Although the lack of resistance has been excused by the fear of severe punishment, such as being sent to concentration camps or execution, the cooperation between ordinary citizens and the Gestapo regarding political information show how people chose to turn away from the path of resistance and participate in carrying out Nazi ideals.
The only explanation for the amount of information passed on to it was through denunciations made willingly by ordinary Germans. The Gestapo spy network of official and unofficial informers was a key ingredient in the distribution of terror and brutality, a dictatorship that turned many Germans into informers and denouncers.
Despite the majority of Germans fully complying to the regime, there are exceptional acts of bravery, such as resistance group The White Rose. The small group of students engaged in passive resistance by distributing anti-Nazi leaflets in the University of Munich. The group sought to remind the Germans of their moral obligations in society by acting as their guilty conscience, since people were aware by 1942 of the inhumane policies such as the persecution of the Jews. The group composed 6 leaflets and made over 15,000 copies.
Every individual has to consciously accept his responsibility as a member of the Western and Christian civilization in this last hour, to arm himself as best as he can to work against the scourge of humanity, against fascism and every other form of the absolute state. Act in a passive resistance wherever you are, block the functioning of this atheistic war machine before it's too late.
Unfortunately, the students' demonstration of upstanding moral behaviour was met with the gruesome death of the guillotine after a janitor at the University of Munich betrayed them to the Gestapo. The immediate reaction to their deaths was to denounce them as traitors, showing how resistance, even passive, was not approved of by most of the population. However, the fact that an isolated group of young people had the courage to stand up show how ordinary Germans were not blind to the wrongs of the Nazi regime and chose to do nothing to stop it. The other form of resistance is active resistance. People who attempted to overthrow the regime through violence or assassination attempts were actively opposed, like communists or political opponents such as left-wing dissidents. Similar to passive resistance, there was no large network to bring down Hitler. People acted alone or in small groups. The incredible case of George Elser, who was the closest to pulling off a successful assassination attempt, planned the whole thing himself. Knowing Hitler would speak in Munich on the anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch, Elser spent months building an elaborate bomb with a 144-hour timer into the speaking platform. Only pure luck saved Hitler when he reorganised the timing of his speech. Considering the high level of skill and planning of the plot to kill Hitler, it was astonishing when the Gestapo interrogation revealed he worked alone.
Elser was a single person, an ordinary German, a man from the working class, acting without the help or knowledge of anyone else. He had a profound sense of justice, and he was concerned about the problems faced by ordinary workers under the Third Reich. However, his family was ostracized in his hometown for decades, part of a guilt-ridden German response to the whole questions of anti-Nazi resistance.
Active resistance proved to not be very effective in bringing down the Nazi state, as like passive resistance, people tended to work alone like Elser, or in small groups such as the July 1944 plot, in which the Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg and a few other men hid a bomb in a briefcase that was placed close to Hitler. However, Hitler survived the assassination attempt, went on to execute them along with 100 other dissidents. The response of Hitler explains why levels of resistance was kept so low. Passive and active resistance groups were crushed and severely punished once caught. The Gestapo's brutal methods of torture were inflicted on rebellious individuals, and on many occasions, opponents of the regime were sent to concentration camps.
The first concentration camp will be opened on Wednesday near Dachau. It has a capacity of 5,000 people. All the communist functionaries, Reichsbanner and Marxist functionaries who threaten the security of the state will be assembled here. Heil!
The White Rose group and the men attempting to assassinate Hitler all perished. The Nazi regime had the policy of no toleration for any forms of resistance, making the people performing acts against the regime all the more courageous. Sadly, their bravery is masked by the guilty consciences of the many Germans who didn't participate in resistance. Although Hitler created an oppressive state meant to suppress resistance, the horrific crimes of the Nazis should never have been allowed to continue.